Brought to you by ExpressCare Health and Skin Center. Get in, get out, get better.
Welcome back to Healthy Living. Many of us have done it at some point in our lives, booty stomping and hiking. But did you know that while hiking you can catch certain diseases that can cause everything from fevers to organ failure? Joining me with more on leptospirosis and other nasty things you can pick up from hiking is ExpressCare's Dr. Jitka Lom.
Hi.
So this is really shocking for me because I actually go hiking all the time. So what exactly is leptospirosis?
There you go. So something that not everybody knows about and you need to know so that you can help yourself should you get sick. So leptospirosis is a bacterial illness that you can get through a small break in your skin, a little scratch or a bug bite, from stagnant water that has had the urine of animals sort of draining into it. So the animals being dogs, pigs, and rodents, especially rats and mice. And so when they urinate, their urine carries the bacteria into the water, then the water mixes with the other water in the puddles that we step in, and then the little cuts on our feet and so on might absorb that and the germs get into our system. And then we feel okay after the hike for 3 or 4 days, and on about the 3rd or 4th day we begin to feel kind of sick, kind of like a flu. So you might not kind of relate it to the hike that you did. Feel sort of like achy, get a fever, get some chills. You think you just have the flu. And that might last for 2 or 3 days, but you do feel quite sick, and body aches and headache are the main really strong symptoms. And then you might recover a little bit and feel okay for 3 or 4 days, and then it really hits you, and then you become super sick. Not everybody, okay, but some people become extremely sick, basically landing in the hospital, in the ICU, and so on, with every organ being affected. So from kidney failure to heart failure to meningitis, brain inflammation, and all that. So around the world, many millions of people get leptospirosis every year. Not everybody gets super sick and in the ICU, but many people will have that very unpleasant illness. And if you know that you've been in the jungle hiking around and maybe you have this, you can get treated and get better.
Okay, are there any alternative names for this disease?
Yes, it can be called jungle fever, 7-day fever because it lasts a while, Weil's disease if it becomes so serious that you actually have hemorrhages, meaning bleeding in your lungs.
So how exactly do you get it? Do you have to have a scratch or a cut when you're in the water?
Yeah, our skin is a fantastic barrier protecting us from the outside world, especially bacteria. But we have a small scratch just from, swordgrass, a mosquito bite, a blister, and this will become a portal for the bacteria to get into your body, especially if you're around, again, stagnant water. So if it's muddy and you're hiking, if there's puddles, if you're in a river. Yeah.
Okay, so some of the symptoms like fevers or flus, it sounds like it could be, difficult to pinpoint this as a disease. So how would people know? What are the symptoms that would show they definitely have this kind of disease?
Right, so you have to have what's called a high index of suspicion. It means you got to think, okay, what was I doing? Was I around sick people who have the flu, or was I maybe hiking within the last week and I might have picked up leptospirosis? And then a blood test can be done to diagnose it, but typically we just treat because we don't want you to get into that super sick thing. So it's a disease that when it's caught early, people do very well.
Okay, so how does a doctor or physician treat this type of disease?
Okay, so we treat it, since it's a bacterial disease, we treat it with antibiotics. That would be something like doxycycline, Zithromax. If the person's pregnant or a child, we might give them amoxicillin. But they respond really quite well to it. There is sometimes also the possibility of prevention. If you know you're going into a swampy area, you can pretty much just start taking it immediately after, or sometimes they even give preventive treatment if it's an expedition going into the jungle.
Okay, so it sounds like if you don't find out or treat this right away, it can get really bad, but can it be fatal?
It can. Typically not. Again, around the world, millions of people do get leptospirosis every year, and a very small percentage will die, but many will get quite sick, and then you miss work and so on. So even if you don't thankfully die, you can still hopefully get better with medication.
Okay, so I actually do go hiking a lot, and I've heard people mention things like, oh, be careful going to the water, or be careful. So what are some other diseases that people can contract from hiking?
So one that's not very common on Guam, but we sometimes hear about, is dengue fever. Dengue fever is a mosquito-borne illness that comes from, again, areas where there's stagnating water, puddles, and so on, and then the mosquito larvae breed, and you get mosquitoes that carry the virus around. But it's a viral disease, okay? So dengue has no treatment. So basically, you just, if you get dengue fever, which is, again, very similar in that you get a flu, you also get a rash with it, body aches, fever, a headache, and so on. But there's no specific therapy. You just basically drink fluids and take Motrin and Tylenol, wait for your body to hopefully recover. Which usually it does, but again, it can be fatal. So dengue is another one. But typically around here, what we see is straightforward staph infections, staph being a bacteria that's very common on our skin and in the tropics. And if you get a small cut and so on, you can get a Guam sore or a boil. This is all from the environment.
All right, thanks so much, Doc. We're just getting started. Dr. Lom answers your questions when Healthy Living returns.